So it is 9:07, so we should go ahead and get things rolling. Hi, everyone. For those who don't know, I'm Daniel Merrill, pronouns she, her. I'm a member of Collective Power Network, and I'll be facilitating and emceeing for our panelists tonight. Just as a general reminder, we're going to be going through a set of questions over the course of this call. If you have any you'd like to make, feel free to drop them in the Q&A box at the bottom, and we will be going through them as the call goes on. I want to introduce us a little bit to what we're focusing on tonight's call. Most simply, labor strategy is one of the most important aspects of what we do as socialists. A huge part of the power that we have as organized socialists is in workplaces and our ability to affect things at the point of production. And because of that, what an effective organizational strategy is for DSA, as the largest socialist organization in a century, is extremely important. We recently published our mass movement labor strategy based on a ton of discussions we had on what Collective Power Networks views as DSA's capabilities, what we can do in the moment with the membership we have. And I'm extremely excited to hear from our panelists tonight on what we have as our capacities in DSA right now. What I want to go ahead and do is just start off by introducing you to some of our panelists, having them each give a brief description of themselves, their background in DSA, their background in labor organizing, before we get started into questions. And first, I want to introduce, for introductions, Ryan Kekris. Ryan?
Hey all, yeah, my name is Ryan Kekris. Pronouns are he, him. I'm with Baltimore DSA. So I've been around in the labor movement for probably close to a decade now. I started out doing political organizing. I worked for the AFL-CIO briefly, and I've been doing building trades organizing and worked as a rank and file member of the Building Trades Union for probably about 8 years now. So a lot of my background comes from running organizing campaigns, primarily in the U.S. South, and primarily working with immigrant workers.
Thank you so much, Ryan. Next, I want to give Daniel Dominguez a chance to introduce himself. Go ahead, Daniel.
Thank you, Daniel. Daniel, my pronouns are he, him. I'm a member of the Los Angeles chapter of DSA. So I'm currently a union organizer in the healthcare industry here in Southern California. I work on external organizing, and I also serve on the Democratic Socialist Labor Commission, which is the part of our organization that is supposed to be setting our priorities and goals when it comes to labor organizing.
Thank you, Daniel. Next, I want to recognize Annabelle. Annabelle?
Hey all, my name is Annabelle, pronouns are she, her. I'm a member of the Sacramento DSA chapter. I was also formerly on the DSLC steering committee last term. I work for the state of California, and I'm a rank and file member of SEIU 1000. My introduction to DSA, I came to my first meeting back in 2016, and my union at the time was about to go on strike. I gave the whole spiel to those DSA members that I had just barely met. And lo and behold, a couple weeks later when my strike went on, those DSA members came and stood on the picket line with me. That was very powerful, and the rest is history.
Thank you very much, Annabelle. And last, but certainly not least, I want to hand it over to Manny for an introduction. Manny.
Hey y'all, my name's Manny. I'm from South Louisiana. I'm based in New Orleans and doing work with the New Orleans DSA chapter. I've been in labor for 7 years. Been a hospitality worker since 2007 or something. And my coworkers and I organized a union at a hotel here in New Orleans. And I've been on staff with Unite here for the past few years and currently unemployed because of all of this stuff. And yeah.
Thank you so much for your introductions, everyone. So tonight what we're going to do is go through some of the key concepts that come out of our labor document and the strategy we're trying to articulate for DSA so that we can expand more on what our vision is and what we're hoping to accomplish. And the first question that we want to go to in this vein is one that's going to be for everyone on our panel to answer. That's about a key component of our document, which is DSA members organizing where they're at. The question I have for our panelists, and we will go in the order that we introduced, is what does organizing where we're at mean? What does that look like specifically in what we do? So first I'll recognize Ryan to speak a bit about that.
Yeah, so I mean, there's been a lot of talk, like particularly today, about DSA's membership drive hitting 100,000 members. I think part of organizing where we're at is kind of setting a new expectation and a new kind of, a new expectation when you join DSA. That part of that involves recruiting at work, organizing at work, and that doesn't necessarily mean like the traditional NLRB campaign or pushing for a union where you don't have one, or organizing in the union you're already in. It just means that you should be trained and tasked with the knowledge to map out your coworkers, assess them, hopefully bring them into DSA, and ultimately, if there is capacity there, you should be able to rely on DSA as an ally to help you organize at work. And I think it's generally considered common knowledge that a key method to organize is relationships, right? And I think that the majority of people in DSA right now have relationships with people at work. They've worked there for a while, or they've worked in that industry for a while. And building on those relationships, not only to bring people into DSA, but also as kind of a two-way street to also build worker power and worker organization where you work now, is something that we can't let that go. We can't miss that opportunity by not promoting that as a core function of DSA.
Daniel, as a member of the DSLC, do you agree with Ryan on that point?
Yeah, I definitely always look, when I hear, organizing where we're at, I always look at it through the lens of DSA. And now, as a member of the steering committee of the DSLC, I have a different perspective on how we actually advance that as a sort of a tenet of our organizing. I'll point to some examples locally here in Los Angeles, some labor organizing that we've done. So in Los Angeles, as you might imagine, we have a sizable sort of Hollywood, a sizable portion of our membership who works in the entertainment industry. So naturally, we wanted them to be able to organize in their industry. And so a few years back, we formed what is called Hollywood Labor. And it was, sort of a subgroup of the labor committee. They set their own priorities. And it really served the function of bringing in other like-minded people, maybe not socialists at the time, from the entertainment industry into DSA. And that concept has, is what has motivated our labor work for about the past year. So about a year ago, we did a labor survey of our membership, and we mapped in what parts of the economy our members are in. And we wanted to very much recreate what we had done with Hollywood Labor. And so at current, we have what we're calling worker circles. So we have one for nonprofit workers. We're getting one started for freelance workers. We have the Restaurant Organizing Project. We have, what other industries do we have? And we have the Educators Worker Circle, which, so all very exciting. They're all led by rank and file workers, and they each get to set their own goals and priorities. And I think that, I think the most important function that serves is we have our members actually see themselves as organizers in their own struggle, not having to go somewhere else to organize, breaking them out of this activist mindset that labor organizing is supporting a strike or something like that. And so a vision that I hope to advance within the DSLC is very much that, right? Mapping our membership, knowing where they work, what sectors they work in, what their organizing goals are, right? Not everyone wants to join a union, nor are they ready to. And we have to just give them a space where they can develop those skills. I think, unless we do something like that, where we start to map our entire membership and we actually get them to come together and organize together, we're essentially operating in the dark, and we're not utilizing the potential of 70,000 members. So that's the vision I hope to advance within the DSL during my time on the DSLC steering committee.
Thank you, Daniel. Annabelle, what to you does it mean to organize where we're at?
Yeah, thank you, Daniel. And forgive me if I kind of glance at my notes a little bit. But, I think as DSA members, I think it's generally accepted that we think workplace organizing is good. Like, we think it's just an unequivocal good. And so, just as a matter of course, I kind of think, being a member of DSA, being a member of the organized working class means just kind of pursuing socialist organizing in our day-to-day lives, like kind of where we're at, as we say. And, I imagine that most DSA members are kind of open to politicizing their daily struggle, politicizing their daily grind at work. And so, I just kind of think organizing where we're at means living out those principles, just in your daily life, like disrupting that capitalist alienation. And, in those very few rare instances, this means like a full-blown organizing campaign, a full-blown union organizing campaign. But, probably what's attainable for a lot of us, like, you can imagine just starting like a group DM with your coworkers, or like being that one that like organizes like group get-togethers with your coworkers or something like that. But the idea is that even just having like a group DM, that's more organization than you had if you didn't have that. That's just a little bit more organization than you had before. Because maybe someday, like in your wildest imaginations, like that would like really turn into something serious. But in the short term, again, it's a place where you can kind of gripe about your job, maybe speak some agitational talk, share the link to your campaign website, be like, hey guys, I think this is a cool campaign. I think you guys would be interested. Or, God forbid, invite your coworkers to a DSA meeting or something like that, But yeah, just overall, I think, DSA is better off if our members are doing this, like, baseline level of organizing, this like low level of organizing that we've just incorporated into our daily life. We are better off as an organization if we're all doing these things, as opposed to just some of us doing it patchwork here and there, based on some type of, preconceived notion of what organizing is. And, DSA has like all these trainings like ready to go right now. Like we have trainings on how to have an organizing conversation, how to map your members, how to map your workplaces. If everyone gets this kind of basic level of training and everyone kind of starts enacting these practices just in their daily life, DSA will be far better off, because that means we can kind of expand our reach into new networks, real life networks that maybe we haven't reached into yet. Fleshing out our real life community networks. And maybe that means you would even come upon some connections that become tactically advantageous to one of our local or national campaigns. But those are doors that remain closed if we do not enact these practices, So that's what it means to me.
Thank you, Annabelle. And lastly, Manny, for you, what does it look like for DSA to organize where we're at right now?
Yeah, I think fundamentally, and imagine a lot of folks on the call like are involved with their unions or some sort of labor organizing, and like we've all heard like the union is you. You make the union. You have to make this happen. If you don't do it, it's not going to happen. So to me, what that means is like to bring that exact same ethos and that self accountability to DSA. That like we are DSA, we have to push to make this happen. And to bring that into the workplace adds all of these other dynamics. Like everyone else has kind of said, like it places us very firmly in the struggle. It doesn't make us apart from it. It means that, whatever campaigns you're running locally, that you're also talking to your cohorts and you're building that organization right there. And another like idea around this is like, what would it look like to run DSA campaigns at work, right? And like folks have already talked about where our relationships are, that's kind of where we're the strongest. So thinking about that, like, okay, we gotta like talk to people at work. What do we need to do that? And I think we're a giant national organization with a ton of talent, a ton of experience, and we need to systematize it. We need to like be able to like train our people up to be able to have those conversations, be able to map, like confront their coworkers. Like I know for me, when I was part of my organizing at the Hilton, like I was scared all the time. I hated it. I naturally just want to just chill and do nothing, but I can't because I don't have health insurance because I'm laid off, and because I've been like a low income worker for like most of my life, and these things push us. So I think it's we need to be able to like support each other and actually train each other to get through these tough things. But yeah, I think that's kind of what everyone else is saying, but that's kind of like what I'm thinking and feeling.
Thank you, Manny. So I want to go into our more specific questions, and we're going to be going to just a couple of our panelists for the next one. And this is going to be on the Democratic Socialist Labor Commission and the question of like what its purpose should be in DSA. So the first thing I want to do is specifically recognize that we'll be talking to Annabelle and then Daniel about this. And firstly, I would just ask Annabelle if you can briefly explain to some of our attendees like what is like the DSLC and like what does it do in DSA presently?
So the DSLC is a commission that was established in 2017 that really presides over all of DSA's national labor work with the idea of kind of like strategizing and setting the agenda for DSA with regards to the labor movement, organizing workers.
Thanks very much. So the question that I want to introduce here for both of you, and we'll start with Annabelle and then go to Daniel, is what is the proper role of the DSLC? How should it be structured and what should it do for labor organizing in DSA?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I would say that, I think the DSLC, we need to advance beyond how it exists and functions now. I'm sure this is on many people's minds, so, I might be repeating what many people are thinking, but, maybe right now it kind of operates a bit like a worker center, doing a lot of advocacy. But I think it can and should really kind of become like a more of a playmaker in DSA. We often hear the question like, well, what should DSA labor activists be doing? But I think Daniel kind of alluded to this earlier. Firstly, like we don't have enough information about our members who is actually in DSA now to really answer the question like, what could we be doing if we even wanted to? So that means like we need to get a grip on where our members work, what their industries are. And from there, we kind of need to do that serious, like analyzing work to decide, what opportunities do we have to organize among our existing membership? What opportunities do we have to use our members to network into sectors and industries that we think are important? What opportunities do we have to recruit from outside our current membership, and maybe bring in workers from industries that we think are important, but also, take a kind of bird's eye view look at all this information and decide what opportunities we think are worth pursuing and most helpful to our national priority campaigns. I mean, but right now, like, this work doesn't get done because we don't have the information. We don't know who our members are right now. You know, and it's because this work, it takes manpower, you know. I mean, like, I think people have been attempting to really map our membership for a long time. You know, we're growing and stuff, so this is the kind of work that really needs to be done in perpetuity, basically. You know, we need the information about who our members are. You know, we need to enable our DSLC steering committee to be political leaders and draw conclusions from the information once we have it. You know, but again, like, we really don't have a lot of ability to gather accurate information right now because we don't have tons of buy-in from the members of the DSLC, like, at large, you know. You know, we have a broader DSLC membership beyond the steering committee, but it's been challenging to activate that as a really deliberative and active body. You know, I think we've had a few, like, membership calls, but I think the format is usually like delivering information and providing kind of like lectures and things like that, educational information. But it really needs to be mobilized into something active and kind of like you know, a subset of our membership that we can really rely on to provide information so that we can get to that point of taking serious, like, political strategic steps. And, you know, like, realistically, like, this should be done, like, across all of DSA. Like, you know, how amazing would it be if, like, oh, the NEC, the Eco-Socialist Working Group, the DSLC, like, they were all collaborating on, like, how to achieve, like, a Green New Deal or something like that. That'd be incredible, you know. But I think, you know, like, you can use that as an example. Like, the DSLC's role, it could be to see, okay, like, well, maybe we have members who are in the building trades, maybe we have members who are in the energy sector or something, and then assess, like, which chapters are best positioned to start recruiting these members. You know, how do we flip our local labor councils to support these initiatives, support the right candidates, like, et cetera, you know. But again, we haven't even embarked, really. I mean, we have, like, just this, you know, a few efforts, like, we've embarked on, like, gathering information, but it's not systematic. And we need a lot more support in doing that stuff. Because until we have a full picture of what's going on in our organization, and then we also need, like, a mechanism for that member buy-in for actual DSLC members to start participating and giving feedback, generating ideas. Until we have these mechanisms, you know, I think it's going to continue the way it's going, where there's a lot of, you know, hypotheticals, like, awesome ideas, tons of opportunities, but we don't know how to take advantage of them, you know.
Thank you, Annabelle. And now I want to go to Daniel, where as a currently sitting member of the DSLC, what do you think its role should be? What do you think it should do?
Yeah, you know, I think, and this is, I think, going to be a challenge for some time to come, but I think the DSLC should really be the place that members in the organization naturally go to or think of when they think of organizing in their workplace, whether that be for mentorship, training, just getting some questions answered. And I think we serve that role for, like, the more activist-minded members who are already embedded in labor organizing, but not the rest of the membership. Like, I come from a chapter with situated in a city that has dense population, so we have one of the biggest chapters, so we have a lot of capacity, and that's one of the reasons I think we have a really high-functioning labor committee. But not every chapter has that, and that has been one of the goals of the current steering committee, is to really help chapters develop their labor formation. As it currently stands, their steering committee, or the DSLC, really is just 12 members, who are elected to the steering committee running the DSLC. I think all of us are very talented organizers, very committed to making the DSLC sort of the place where members come to organize. But we're also leaders in other parts of the organization, so that makes it really hard when it comes to capacity. I think we're finding our stride, but I think we're still not acting on a strategy. We're very much acting on factors that are sort of outside of our control. And so, like Annabelle said, and yeah, we don't really know what we're working with at the moment. We are largely just, like I said, reacting to factors outside of our control. And we aren't, it feels at times like we're not doing the role we were given. But I think that has more to do with sort of the limitations that we've placed on ourselves by saying that 12 members must decide the strategy for the DSLC. So I think the DSLC is, it has the potential to be more. At the moment, almost anyone in the organization can join the DSLC. The requirements are actually quite low. As long as you fit one of the criteria, you're able to come in, but it's not something that's really promoted throughout the organization. So I think sort of, even though the barrier is already pretty low, I think lowering it just a little bit more to allow it to be open to all workers. And to have it be a democratic body where our members come to deliberate, to debate, to discuss, and again, just find common ground with workers in same industry, same employer possibly. We don't know that, right? So for example, Amazon is a target of many labor groups at the moment. And it could be something it's a project that we could help contribute to if we just knew which of our members are working in Amazon warehouses at the moment, but we don't. So I think the challenge ahead of us is really making it into a body where like dynamic labor organizing happens, and where we really broaden the capacity of the formation by bringing our members in, all of them, right? Not just the more activist-minded or experienced organizers, but all of those who want to play a part in DSA's labor organizing.
Thank you, Daniel. For our next question, we're going to go to Manny and then Ryan. The next question has to do with one of the priorities that we outline in our labor strategy document, which is organizing the South, specifically as a region. So starting with Manny and then going to Ryan, I want to ask, why is organizing the South a priority, and what should we be doing to organize the South? And we'll start with Manny.
Yeah, I think just for me, just being from the South or raised in the South, it's just so important. But I think for us, like we know, or like, we hear the phrase a lot, organize the South, and just like uplifting it all kinds of ways. But there's also the counter argument, like, why is that important? There's not many workers there. There's like, shouldn't we focus on like big cities that are like got a bunch of workers so we could just like halt the rails of capitalism right there? I hear that, but a few things, like just looking at the South and just looking at like the development of this thing we call a country to this day, like it's it is completely in its bones. Just like the enslavement of all, like millions of people have built this complete empire that we're like fighting against, and completely off of black labor, and really kind of like wrestling with that and kind of like, what does that mean, like breaking the little pieces off. So like recently, just like looking at how the South has completely like screwed unions, because like they would bring their shitty businesses down to the South and cut wages, exploit people even more furiously. Like in a lot of ways, the South is like an internal colony, and that's real. And like thinking of New Orleans specifically, like post Katrina, like the like neoliberal kind of austerity that happened just like immediately after the storm is like constantly happening throughout the South. Like the complete decimation of the public education system in the city also decimated the union, the teachers union, which is all, you know, mostly black women. It was very well organized and it was destroyed. There is no public schools in New Orleans anymore. And like, what does that mean? Like, if we're winning badass demands in LA and Chicago and like New York and bigger cities, like that's amazing. But like, what ideas are these assholes doing in the South? They're fucking with us. And like the South is completely our losing flank. It's our weak spot, and it's our weak spot because it's been like the right's bastion for since forever, since the 1600s. So those things are super important, and you know, if we think of ourselves as a national organization, we have to build up our weak flanks. We have to like build up the entire thing. And just to share like a little story again with my union, like, you know, as far as, you know, gaming kind of made their thing in the Gulf Coast the past 15 years or so. And, you know, United Here's gaming is like in Atlantic City and in Vegas. Those casinos were starting to build their bullshit here in the South, and non-union, doing whatever the hell we want, whatever. But because of the power in those big places, they were able to like send organizers to build up the union here. Like there was literally this one organizer that was here for like 5 years building up the union, and like through that process organized like 5 different shops. And you know, we're not a union, and like we're not like on that level, but like that's kind of like the vision of what we could be doing. You know, we have a ton of capacity in pockets and around the way. One way to like really build up the South is to like make that stronger, be more available. You know, for me, like being able to like have a mentor and walk me through and push me through the unionization process is incredibly important. Like it would just be nothing. Like I would just be nothing. There would be nothing. So like we just gotta like keep doing that with each other and be more intentional and structured, and we could truly like create a very strong like Southern chapters throughout, and yeah, and hold it down.
Thank you, Manny. And Ryan, why is organizing the South important to you?
So, you know, kind of piggybacking off what Manny just said, I mean, I always think of the South, and I think of the, you know, the quote by Lincoln of, you know, a house divided cannot stand, right? We can look back, you know, basically to the time of Lincoln, and we can see that the South has been used to undercut labor standards everywhere. They have always kind of modeled their economy on pushing standards downwards, on using race, particularly, quite literally with slavery and Jim Crow, and now slightly more subtly, at least in the construction industry, with mainly workers from Central and South America. They use that to drive down standards in the North. And I always think that, you know, no matter how strong the teachers union is in Chicago, the union and teachers union in New Orleans just gets wiped out. Or no matter how strong the UAW is in Detroit, the workers down south have nothing, and then the UAW can't organize down there because conditions are close to being impossible, while the auto industry uses the profits they make in the South to then lobby and undercut wages and working standards in the North. We've seen this forever, right? You can go back to like William Foster and trying to organize the steel industries and the coal industries, the CIO. They've always used this. I mean, it is impossible for us to have a country where huge chunks of it are operating under an entirely different, you know, like system, right, than the rest. So, you know, I think about kind of other, you know, like labor strategies and proposals about, building up strong unions in larger cities. And then, personally, what I think about is, at least in the building trades, in a single generation, we've gone from almost the entire country being 60, 70, 80% union density in the construction industry. We've gone from that now to being, particularly in the South, I would say generously 5-10%, at least in my union, of union density. And broadly, we're down to 10% union density nationwide. So in a single generation, they have destroyed labor standards in the South. And so I think of the modern example of in New York City a year or two ago, you had the Count Me In campaign, where, New York City historically has been just an incredibly strong union stronghold. And you had a developer who went up there and was building a project in Manhattan and basically not using union labor. I mean, that's like, that is a Trojan horse, right? That is someone inside of our stronghold, and they were based in Miami. They were a Southern general contractor. So they go up to Miami and they say, well, we're a Southern company. We're going to use the Southern way of doing business. And so what that means is the North will always be playing defense, no matter what, as long as the South remains the way it is. And, in a more practical sense too, like a lot of my work in the building trades is trying to organize workers in the South who quite frankly have all of the worst practices of the construction industry are like amped up to 11 in the South. So of course there are undocumented workers all over the country. Of course they are exploited. But at the same time, in California now we can do a private right of action and file a worker misclassification suit because of AB 5. And we can actually do something in a very limited sense, but something to help these undocumented workers. And before AB 5, a member of mine was arrested on his way to work by ICE and detained for months without even a hearing. And it took my whole union mobilizing everywhere to get him out. So there is a difference. And in the South, these workers have no reprieve. And then ultimately what happens is their bosses use the money they make off of them in the South. And like I said, they go up north and they bid on projects and they bid 20, 30, 40, 50% under what every other contractor is bidding because they're basically not even paying their workers. And so it's a cycle that we can never break. And so every time I see proposals and strategies that don't organize the South, I just think that, we are missing the point here. And there are no closed economies under capitalism. There is no closed economy in the U.S. No matter how strong you are in New York City or Chicago, if I move a whole union in New York City to be the most progressive militant union in the world, and we're general striking every day, right? It doesn't matter because all the companies in the South will just use that money to go up there and destroy you. And so ultimately, I think DSA has to prioritize organizing the South for a lot of reasons. I mean, I think there's a human reason of there are millions and millions of workers who have it worse than the average worker up north or out west or on the coast. And they deserve, they deserve to be able to fight, and we deserve to have an organization that prioritizes them. And in a practical sense too, like I said, we can't ignore them. We'll never win if we don't figure that out. And if we don't build capacity, if we don't build organization there, then we're just wasting time. And no matter what we do elsewhere, we'll never be able to come to fruition.
Thank you very much, Ryan. The next thing I want to go to is that we have a number of action points, action items, if you will, that are labeled in our document for things that DSA should do for our labor strategy. Some would be fairly uncontroversial for DSA members, such as supporting organizing efforts undertaken by national unions or engaging in labor solidarity work. Some have very specific strategic expectations, like making sure there's always a labor component to every DSA strategy we engage in, or building out workplace branches. Perhaps the spiciest is no longer create pamphlets like why socialists should become teachers. These are a number of action items that we've listed out for what DSA should do and what it should look like organizing in labor. What I'd like to ask each panelist is to just talk for a bit on what it would look like for DSA to actually go about accomplishing these action items. What would that look like in practice? And I'll go first right back to Ryan for that.
So I think in a basic sense, I would like to see more training. I think that there's a lot of very talented, labor organizers all across DSA. And I think right now, a lot of them, I think just by sheer density, are going to be in larger cities. we should be setting up, cross-regional trainings. We should be doing like delegations. We should be really focusing on kind of sharing our knowledge. And that includes things like basic tools. Like I said, kind of in the first question of like teaching people how to map their workplaces. And like I said, that doesn't have to necessarily be because you're running a campaign, but even for like, the example would be a political response, right? Trump does something bad. DSA wants to mobilize. If your workplace is mapped out and you know kind of what your coworkers, how they feel, like what they're engaged, what they're moved by, you can so much easier get them to show up for stuff. And getting people to show up for stuff is the first step to getting them into DSA, to getting them to be a socialist, and ultimately to build power both internally in DSA and externally in your workplace. So like a real basic thing, I think, would be structuring and empowering the DSLC to be able to give trainings, to be able to set national like curriculum almost on how to do labor organizing. And there's so many people from every caucus, from every chapter, from every branch who know a lot of stuff from a lot of different industries. And we should share that knowledge and develop, DSA specific trainings rather than, frankly, using labor notes as kind of like a fill-in for something that we have more than enough capacity to handle ourselves.
Thank you, Ryan. Daniel, what does it look like to make these action items happen?
Yeah, I think what I would advocate the most strongly for is, if your chapter has a labor formation, like make sure you're involved in it. And then from there, make sure that you find a way to plug into the DSLC. As I mentioned before, it's actually not that hard. And I think that would go a long way to actually answer one of the questions that someone posed in the Q&A, which is what I like if I could just wave a magic wand that I think would kind of fix things in the DSLC. I think it would just have more capacity, right, and bring in more people. I think again, like I'll mention again, our steering committee is made up of some of the best organizers in the organization. We're all committed to making it happen, but inevitably you're going to run into limitations, and as being just a group of 12 of us, so. That's what I would do. I brought in the capacity. And I think that some of that does have to happen through trainings like Ryan mentioned. I remember a sort of a 3-hour training that I did in my chapter shortly after joining, and it was pretty much what it was. It was how to have an organizing conversation. And that totally changed it for me. I thought, up until then, I didn't really view myself as an organizer who could actually change things. And just having like that one skill, which is, it's like one of the most fundamental things you do as an organizer, completely changed how I viewed my role in my workplace and DSA. So those are the recommendations that I think apply to almost every member, right? That they can do just right off the bat is join your local labor committee. Obviously starting one's a lot harder than joining one that already exists. So, reach out to the DSLC. We can help you do that. So I think just building up the capacity of the DSLC through getting more members is, I think, the way that you actually get to implement these action items.
Annabelle, how about you in regards to these action items?
Yeah, I think like Ryan and Daniel mentioned, I think we have the potential to do serious, concerted, like systematic trainings that are, not hard to do, like, especially with everything virtual, like, something that tons of members can just easily join in right away. Thinking about the mapping type of work that me and Daniel have kind of referred to a little bit, really getting a sense of where our members are at right now, what are our potentials right now. Additionally, it's always on my mind that, imagine if all our members just had ready access to trainings like, how to have organizing conversations, how to map your workplace, something that was along the lines of like the history of the labor movement. What is the contemporary legal context of the labor movement? Why is it the way it is right now? Know your workplace rights. DSA has literal experts in this subject matter right now, and we've never called upon them to help with this type of like member to member education. I mean, it seems like this is a no-brainer. We just have to find the ability, the willpower, the manpower to do it. You know, because all these things we're laying out, this is what's necessary to get to that place for having serious, like concerted, deliberative conversations about which industries, which sectors, what opportunities do we need to take advantage of to pursue our national campaigns. Like I think we've kind of referred to like the building trades, energy, like logistics and transportation is always referred to. We can't get to that place of like making a plan to enter into these industries or recruit from these industries if we don't have these other things in place. Like if we're not training up our members as they are now, if we're not mapping our members where they are now, I see it as like, I don't know, we ask often like, okay, what is the DSA labor strategy? But we kind of ask that in a vacuum. It's not in relation to a question of, well, what is the DSA national strategy? How can labor fit into the DSA national strategy? And I think it's because like there's so much information that we just don't have. Like we don't know what our actual positioning is right now. Not yet.
Thank you, Annabelle. And last but certainly not least, Manny, what do you think it would look like to carry out these action items?
Yeah, basically just kind of repeating what other folks have said. I think bylaws, I'm not sure if that was mentioned, but like that would be, I think, a great first step is like hashing out bylaws in the DSLC, because part of this stuff is like, because we're not even able to like have this conversation with each other. So that'd be cool to just like set up like regular general meetings, deliberative meetings, being able to be like, okay, let's like, what does it actually mean to like run a mapping, like an internal mapping through the whole organization, and then boom, do that. And then be like, okay, what would it look like to just, who's able to do these trans, boom, like just like setting it up. And just like, I think I'm always a proponent of like going a little bit slower and just making sure that's fine. And then moving on. So I think that to me, that's just like the biggest next step. Cause like, we have this national body, so we just gotta like organize it. Yeah, I think. Sorry, I'm losing my brain right now. Yeah, and just like there's already like a lot of amazing national projects going on, like the ROP and USPS and so on. So like that is all like super amazing and should continue. And in some ways, like that could be a way to like build out some of the structures, because there's a lot of activity. We just need to like assess and then move forward,
Thank you so much, Manny. And thank you to all the panelists for working through on these more general topics in regards to our labor strategy. We're going to go in now to some of the audience submitted questions that we've gotten over time. The way we're going to handle this is that after I read a question, we'll have a given panelist volunteer to answer that question based on their interest or experience, or I can name you if no one in particular volunteers quickly enough. But we're just going to work through stuff bit by bit as we go on. I want to go first to our question that we got submitted in advance of this call that we wanted to make sure to get to. This is from Eleanor. I'm going to go ahead and read it now. From reading CPN's mission, it seems they are against the rank and file strategy. What draws me to that strategy is the emphasis on joining strategic unions. I think recent strikes have shown us that joining teachers and nurses unions can be more effective than joining just any union because of said union's ability to strike and agitate for common good demands. With a deadline of less than 10 years to act on climate change, how does CPN's strategy deal with the fact that if I were to organize where I'm at my current job, I would still have very little power to do anything for my community. Who would like to answer this question? Ryan, go ahead.
Yeah, so I guess the first thing I could say about that would be that, unfortunately, union density is at a low point right now, right? I think we all understand that the union and labor movement at large is on the defensive. There is no single union that you could join and organize under that is going to stop climate change in 10 years. I mean, that is a unfortunate reality. I am also biased here, but I would argue that if you are interested in, doing like an interest project into a union, particularly because of climate change, I would suggest that you go to the U.S. South and join a building trades union. The South is a hub for dirty energy. My union, for example, is right now organizing workers in Houston, Texas, who all work in oil and gas. The labor movement there collapsed probably 20, 30 years ago. We're building up basically from nothing. These workers work in incredibly precarious industries, doing work that is not sustainable like for another year, let alone for 10 years or for however long. So if that is your priority, there is no strike for the common good, for example, that CTU or UTLA could do that is going to fix the dirty industry in the South. That is just the way it is. Now, I do agree that, certainly there is like an energy, right, within the teachers unions and within the nursing unions. But I think the notion that they are somehow more strategic or more worthwhile for organizing as opposed to like organizing where you work now, I don't think that's correct. I think that, expanding union density is what we need to focus on, right? And we need to expand union density in a way that is scalable and that is in alignment with DSA's politics, and that builds new unions as well, that are able to do things that the current labor movement cannot do. Because ultimately they are on kind of their heels right now. And, as much as I admire like the UE, for example, they are not able to overcome kind of those material like impasses, right, that the labor movement as a whole right now is facing. So our only solution is to build density everywhere, to push everywhere, and to challenge capitalism everywhere, because there is no kind of like, there's no shortcut, I guess you could say, to fixing these problems.
Thank you so much, Ryan. And thank you, Eleanor, for submitting that question in advance of tonight's call. Before I move on to some more of the audience questions, I just want to go ahead and drop a note here that if you're enjoying this discussion and you really agree with the points that have been made tonight in regards to DSA labor strategy and how we should move forward, you should apply to join Collective Power Network so we can keep organizing for this in DSA. I believe we have someone who's prepared to drop the join link in the chat for everyone so that you can click through and sign up. I highly recommend you do so. But I also want to briefly recognize Annabelle to speak a bit to the last question as well. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Annabelle.
I know you're requested to speak. Just one thing it's on my mind, like as, I organized my own union. I'm reform minded. Like I would love to see socialist politics reflected in my own union. Firstly, I'll say there's nothing that CPN can do, nothing that anyone in DSA can do to preclude you from pursuing a career in teaching or in nursing if you believe that that is what you should be doing to advance the movement for socialism, and we have solidarity with you if that's what you choose to do. But from my own experience, from my own perspective, like it must be said that reform movements in existing unions, like they take years sometimes, so I take that 10-year mark seriously as well. I agree that we need to focus on labor organizing that can address climate change as soon as possible. Like it's an existential threat to us all. But you could spend 10 years exclusively internally organizing in your own union local just to try to reform it and make it democratic and make it reflect like the actual members' politics or something like that, just internal organizing. And then who knows how long it could take to, you know, challenge your international union or actually embark on external political organizing from there. And so I think that's where we're coming from, is like, we take the 10 years seriously and we want to start organizing now, today, with the membership we have right now. And we want to assess the opportunities we have right now at our fingertips that we really have not been able to really assess in detail yet.
Thank you, Annabelle. Great contribution. I want to go to the first of our audience submitted questions we've had tonight. Question 1. I am a member of a relatively new DSA organizing committee. Right now, it seems like we're really far from the point where we could comfortably invite and involve large numbers of our coworkers to DSA. What are the most important things we should do as a nascent chapter to set ourselves up to do the kind of work you're talking about? Who would like to answer this?
I can take a stab. Yeah, I think, with regards to the process, I don't really have that much, but I think, I think mapping is always where you want to start, right? Is map your city, the town, the county, whatever your jurisdiction is, find out who the key players are, who the most important employers, who are the electeds that carry the most influence, and map your membership, right? Figure out where they're at, either where they work, sort of where else they organize. And I think from there, you find your priorities, set your priorities, and build your chapter around that. I think the last thing, at least in my 2 years in DSA, one thing I've learned is you don't want a chapter that just balloons out of control and end up with 10, 15, 20 working groups, committees, what have you, and because that makes it a lot harder to rein in down the line. And instead of having a few focused projects, you have committees with 2 to 3 people that actually maybe aren't actually doing that much, right? Because they got excited about a particular issue but don't know how to organize around it, or it's just not strategic in that particular location. So it's hard to move the issue. So I would, I'd say don't be afraid to set priorities and stick to them, and don't be afraid to, what's the word I'm looking for? And just trying to sort of make sure that everyone's working on a collective project, not just their own pet projects all over the place.
Thank you, Daniel. And I want to follow up on this in terms of the question of power mapping, just in regards to resources, with another question in regards to how we can manage the training and resources that are involved in this. The next question I'm reading: what is currently holding the DSLC back from creating a pipeline that tracks people, trains them in specific skill sets, and then gives them space and time to create efficient ways to address the lack of data and organization of our members? Was there no labor resolution at the convention that supported these efforts? Who would like to speak to this one? Yeah,
I'll go again if you don't mind hearing me talk again. In theory, nothing is holding us back, right? So sort of just the limitations that we've placed on ourselves. I do want to give credit to some of the mapping work that we have done. So some of our comrades on the DSLC have mapped their respective regions. So for those of you who don't know, as a member of the steering committee of the DSLC, we each come from particular regions. We're not really assigned to them, but we represent that region. And so some of our comrades have done that work, and it has led to really cool things, right? Like it's sort of informal networks. And so I think, again, I'll just come back to the issue of capacity. I think finding a way to build up that capacity. I think the mapping work that we have done already has led to a little bit of broadening that capacity. So in California, we have an informal labor network that it did not come from the DSLC. It came from members of the organization who were self-organized, brought in other California chapters because they wanted to talk about labor organizing. Something very similar happened in the Southwest, where they were holding Southwest regional calls, and again, this happened outside of the DSLC. But I think incorporating that into the DSLC's work is, I think that's what's going to help us grow. I think to the first part, again, that's not something that we've been able to embark on. Actually, training people up, giving them new skills to organize. It's very much within our, I think within our skill set. We just haven't done it to capacity. I think I know of various groups of members out there who are developing their own training programs, and I think we could borrow from them, learn from them. Like my comrades have already alluded to, like all this stuff already exists in DSA. There's no need to go outside of the organization or reinvent the wheel when it comes to that.
Thank you, Daniel. And I want to also recognize Annabelle again with some thoughts on this question.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question. I think it's probably on like anyone who has exposure to the DSLC. I'm sure like this is the question that's like on their mind. Just the perspective of mapping. So Daniel mentioned the California Labor Network, and we kind of embarked on some early member mapping. To give it a picture of the scale of this work, I think we had about 9 members of our local chapter trying to map our chapter's membership, which means we all had a list of 100 people to call and ask detailed questions about where do you work, what industry are you in, are you full-time, part-time, how long have you worked there, are you in a union, are you not? It's been months, and we are still in the process of doing this work. Like, it's labor intensive stuff. It's so valuable to do, but it is labor intensive. And so considering that, we also have to recognize that frequently our chapters are, our active members in DSA are spread thin. It is also true. Like, so there's kind of like maybe like an endemic problems in DSA about like, we want to keep a lot of people engaged. Like, we need a lot of people who are willing to participate in this, like volunteer and do work. And so in the areas of the organization where this just isn't, it just hasn't been built up, it's hard to kind of get out of the rut a little bit. And it takes a concerted effort to get out of the rut. So that's my perspective on why it's challenging, but why it's important, and we need to actually put resources to this and make a concerted effort.
Thank you, Annabelle. I want to go to our next question. It is extremely difficult to organize in the United States. Labor laws are toothless and workers' rights have been shredded. It takes tremendous dedication and commitment by workers to overcome a serious boss anti-union campaign, and it takes discipline and skill on the part of organizers to lead workers through battle. How can DSA contribute to minimizing the boss's campaigns and increasing workers' abilities to win? Manny, go ahead.
Yeah, I think from my experience, like I went through a 4-year fight at my Hilton, and like, yeah, that anti-union campaign sucks to go through. It's the worst, and it works, but it doesn't work if you're like organized and prepared beforehand. So I think, we're not like that organized on that level yet as an organization to be able to lead whole campaigns, or like we have people that have done that, but we're not organized to do that. So part of what we're pushing and like thinking about is like, and looking back at history, just looking at like same union density from like 100 years ago, and how our like political ancestors did the fucking organizing and built the unions from nothing, from like insane conditions, which today they are still insane conditions. So I guess it's not like a direct answer, but it's like we need to build up the actual structure to be able to like push people through campaigns. And also a lot of our campaigns as of now, aren't like, we're not confronting the boss at work, which is kind of a really scary thing, right? That's what happens. But if you're like pushing a certain other campaigns, like it won't be as difficult on that level. So I think doing smaller level campaigns to build up capacity and confidence is key. You know, we got to like become to like build those kind of structures up and like build those like networks and formalize them, regular training, all that stuff. So we're not there yet at all, but like we definitely can be. We definitely can, you know, just like I've got 7 years of organizing experience and I still feel like I don't know anything, which is crazy. But even just that little bit, I could spend a couple of hours a week talking to other chapters. Like I've got that capacity, and just with a couple of hours, like you can give someone the confidence to do what they got to do. Because sometimes the will is there, they just like don't know. And I know there's a little aside, like the restaurant organizing project. You know, some of that organizing has been around like safety at the workplace. And there's been like, I've been hearing and in contact with some folks in New Orleans around like, you know, they're thinking about organizing their restaurant or whatever. And it's hard. And like people want to fight, people want to do stuff, but like, they just like don't know. And like, I didn't know. And it wasn't until like my organizer was knocking on my door every day, just like pushing me to do shit. That's how I learned. So, you know, you're completely right in recognizing like the magnitude of what we have to do. But yeah, I think it's just a matter of like reorganizing and just conversations with each other.
Thank you, Manny. For our next question. In DSA, we often see disagreements on strategy take place obscured from the real issue at hand, taking personal potshots at opposing caucuses rather than clearly stating our positions. What specifically makes the CPN strategy different from other proposed directions for the DSLC, and where is there overlap? Yeah, Ryan, go ahead.
So, I mean, I would say that our proposals are different from at least the ones I've read, you know, on a lot of points. I think the emphasis on where we organize, on the sorts of approaches we're organizing around are, you know, we disagree on a lot of fundamental principles around like what constitutes a strategic industry. Should we even like think that way around organizing? So I think like, you know, comparing, you know, our proposals with other big proposals from other caucuses or other socialist, you know, projects speaks for itself. You know, I am proud that our proposal is relatively unique, I would say. I mean, I don't think that we're you know, pulling a lot of this out of nowhere. I mean, I think a lot of what we put in this proposal was carefully put in based on what has worked and what hasn't worked historically, right? You know, for example, like, you know, for the past roughly 100 years, nearly every single socialist project across the spectrum has used some form of entryism as their labor, you know, tactic, strategy, emphasis, what have you, right? We can look back through history and, you know, frankly see that it has not borne out what they thought it would. These cadres of professional socialist organizers have not largely been able to infiltrate and win over politically major labor unions in the U.S. You know, in fact, we've seen kind of the opposite. A lot of our major unions have kind of degenerated politically and have gotten more kind of, you know, conservative and more fearful, largely based on the lack of union density. So what I appreciate about CPN strategy is that rather than kind of tail these institutions who are for, truthfully at this point, like they are on the decline. They need help. Rather than tail them and attempt to win them over now when they're at probably their weakest point in a major generation, we're kind of seeking to push them by emphasizing new organizing, by emphasizing DSA leading new organizing where we work now. And I think of a lot of the building trades unions in the South, and a lot of every union in the South, they have locals that are 100 people. If you organize a new shop of 10, 15 people, you probably have close to a working majority of newly organized workers who had to fight to build their union, who have now injected themselves into that union or into that local. There's no amount of entryism you could do to replicate that. I think worker organization and worker radicalism and socialist politics are driven by struggle. And the only way we can build the unions that we want to see, and the unions that we all like kind of harken back to in the 20s and 30s, is by engaging in struggle and pushing our members now to engage with their coworkers and push them to struggle. So I'm proud that we are not kind of doing what every other, socialist cadre and project has tried to do unsuccessfully. And then I hope that, you will see our proposals being pretty new and based more on kind of the outcomes of those approaches rather than just trying to do them better this time.
Thank you, Ryan. And I want to follow off your point in regards to the South to ask another question that we received. What does organizing the South look like practically, particularly for members that don't live in the South?
So just like a first initial thought is to like be involved with your labor branch in your chapter, and also to like get involved with the DSLC and to like be in those spaces. Because ultimately that, it's just like being in struggle with like other like Southern comrades. So that's kind of like a first kind of thought is like investing your time into DSA on your level does help Southern comrades as well. But I would like encourage to push, to get involved on a national level so that you're in contact. And I think also just like, pushing like more, another kind of thing that we think is important too is like regional organizations, right? Like, in the past few months or so, the DSLC has been hosting kind of Southern regional meetups. And I think it's been 2 or 3 or something. And those have been like really awesome. Just being like, oh, wow, there's other, whoa, you're also doing this stuff too. And like, this is hard. And, just like talking and discussing and getting to know each other and like feeling less down and less sad and more like together and more part of an organization and part of a national organization. So yeah, I guess to say that just like trying to pull us together as much as possible is kind of our vision.
Thank you very much, Manny. For our next question, I want to ask, what are your thoughts on relating to existing labor leadership? I agree with the document that we should avoid labor bureaucrat caricatures, but we clearly need to push or even oust a lot of bad labor leaders to do better.
Oh, Dana, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, of course. What are your thoughts on relating to existing labor leadership? I agree with the document that we should avoid labor bureaucrat caricatures, but we clearly need to push or even oust a lot of bad labor leaders to do better.
So yes, I would agree that like I think that the current crop of labor leaders in the U.S. are products of their time, right? A lot of these leaders kind of came up through the rank and file during a time where unions were like on the defense. They were being attacked very aggressively They went from being very high in market share to being very low in market share and very low in density. You look at like Trumka, who, a lot of people don't realize this, but Trumka, kind of made his name by being in kind of a reform caucus. He was kind of a radical leader who led strikes. The times where he kind of learned how to be a labor leader were during kind of the worst period in labor history, in modern labor history, for the movement at large. And so a lot of them are products of that, where they've seen kind of unions be decimated legally. They've seen like the Patco strikes. They've seen what happens when you strike and lose. So they're timid. They are fearful. I mean, you look at like what the longshoremen did a year or two ago, where they got hit with a labor law violation that could have bankrupted them from one mistake. Like the example I tell people is that I have to buy personally separate insurance for myself as a union organizer to insure myself in case I get arrested doing my job because my union cannot defend me. So there are all these things that make people terrified. They see the swift hand of the government as being able to basically bankrupt a union with one blow. And, kind of what I'm getting at here is they are products of kind of the environment that they are leading under, right? The way to get better leadership to me is not just by challenging them politically through internal organizing. To me, it is making them tail the socialist movement. We go out and we do the organizing. DSA leads campaigns. We work with unions who want to work with us and locals who want to work with us, but if not, we go elsewhere. Nothing, I look back historically, like the AFL was largely challenged and spurned into action by the insurgent CIO of their new types of organizing, of industrial organizing, of pushing them and making them seem outdated and weak. So I've always kind of been under the impression or under the assumption that if we start organizing and start building pressure on the ground among workers, then the labor leaders will have to either join us or become irrelevant. To me, that is a much better approach, even when, I think we all agree that the crop of labor leaders we have now largely are not the ones we ideally would want. It's simply not easy enough for us just to go and replace, the head of a major IU. I mean, that kind of, Annabelle pointed that out earlier, that could be a multi-decade project at a minimum. So I've always been under the, just the thought that we should focus more on organizing, bring new members into the unions, and from there the leadership will reflect the people that they represent rather than vice versa.
Thank you very much, Ryan. I want to go to one last question before we start wrapping up. This is a question that Daniel Dominguez referenced earlier. If you had a magic wand, what would be the first thing you would want to see change within the DSLC to make it work better for locals? And not to call on someone when I haven't this whole time, but I think this would be a good question for Annabelle, actually.
Sure, yeah. I mean, like magic wand, actually like deliberative membership meetings, I think would be transformative for the DSLC. And this is something that I think, CPN like really envisioned when we wrote Resolution 3. Like, we had hoped that some of these reforms to the DSLC would make it more of a deliberative space, because once you open that up, that is when you can start that flow of information, that's flow of ideas, sharing the workload, and that's how you kind of, like I said, like get out of that rut that I had referenced when you just don't have enough help. Like we have got to make it a actually democratic deliberative body. So that's my magic wand wish.
Thank you very much, Annabelle. As I mentioned, this is where we're going to go ahead and start wrapping up. Firstly, I want to say I appreciate everyone that's been on. This has been a fantastic attendance. Having, for most of this call, over 120 people on is pretty incredible. I want to just drop a few asks for everyone following into this call. First things first, I just really want to boost some of the stuff that Daniel has talked tonight about the direction the DSLC should go and what we should be doing with it. I know that these are still works in progress, but Daniel is working on plans both for sectoral organizing work for the DSLC and for democratizing the DSLC that are going to be coming up in the near future. So I would definitely encourage you to follow and pay attention to what happens in that vein. I want to ask everyone to please share this labor document with the members of your chapter, the other people you know who do labor organizing work, and with the people you know who are interested in organizing work generally. Part of the work of DSA is trying to bring in and recruit people who aren't here yet. And I think CPN's labor strategy is something that can really appeal to being able to organize where people are. I want to make sure that people know to join the DSLC Slack and actually do get involved, so we can try to make sure as much of DSA is involved in our labor strategy. And I want to encourage you to join CPN if you agree with the stuff we've said. I'm asking you once again to join Collective Power Network and organize for our platform in DSA. Ryan has shared links for both joining CPN, to our labor document, and to join the DSLC Slack in the chat. So please grab those links and follow through on them if you're interested in any of those before you close out from the Zoom. This has been a lovely conversation, and I want to thank all of our panelists for being on and just generally being great at articulating their vision for what DSA should do and what we should be having happen in our labor organizing. So thank all 4 of you for being on here tonight.
Thanks, you guys. Thanks for moderating, Daniel.
Of course.
Yeah, thank you, Daniel. You were great.
All right. Have a good evening, everyone. And thanks to all the attendees.